call to order the City Council special meeting of July the 23rd. And the first order of business is the pledge, so if you'll stand and join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Council members: Connie Williams.
Here.
Jim Garaventa.
Here.
Matt Hawkins.
Here.
Mark Flemmer.
Present.
George Segarini.
Here.
City clerk is here. Administrator Tim Miller.
Here.
Interim engineer is absent. Attorney Douglas White.
Here.
Administrative Services Director Jennifer Callaway.
Here.
Fire Chief Amy New.
Here.
And Lieutenant Turu Vanderbilt.
You will not be here tonight.
And Community Development Director Rochelle Kellogg. Here.
Okay, City Clerk's report on agenda posting.
At 2 p.m. on the 20th day of January 2016, the agenda for this meeting was posted outside City Hall for public view.
Approval of the agenda, it's going to be pretty simple. There's only one thing on the agenda, so is there anything else that the council members need to change or add? Before we go into the marijuana regulation presentation, we're going to have open public forum, so if you just wait 1 second.
Sorry.
Okay, so public forum. The public may address the council on any item of public interest not otherwise on the agenda that is within the jurisdiction of the city. No action may be taken. Matters to be addressed may be referred to city staff or placed on a subsequent meeting agenda. Speakers are limited to a 5-minute presentation. Seeing no one, I will move on to item E, new business. Item number 1, marijuana regulation presentation. Public comment, discussion, and possible direction from the City Council regarding marijuana dispensaries and cultivation. And I'll turn this over to Churchill and White.
Mayor and Council, what we're going to do tonight is a workshop dealing with marijuana. Our team, which is made up of Josiah Young, who's one of our legislative advocates, and then Christopher LaGrassa, who's one of our attorneys, are going to go over kind of like the existing state of the law, how things are going to kind of go. And then there'll be an audience participation point where people can get up and go and look at some of the questions that we posed in the back and kind of vote. What they would like to see in terms of Sonora, and then we'll bring it back and to the council and have some discussion and kind of see whether or not the workshop elicits any kind of action plan or anything else that you'd like us to discuss further. So the goal tonight is to provide you some information, get some community feedback on these important issues, and then figure out if the council would like some more information or whether or not there's some action items that they'd like us to pursue. So with that, I'd like to introduce Josiah. He'll go over, introduce himself, and so will Chris, and then we'll go through the presentation and workshop for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. White, and hello, Mayor and council members and audience participants. It's a privilege to be here with you to deliver this marijuana workshop. Hopefully it's informative and there can be some robust discussion that can help us map out where we're heading. There are a certain set of laws and some uncertainties, and we're trying to figure out where the gray area ends and where there needs to be some definitive regulation, whether it be banning, whether it be permissive use on the controversial issue of marijuana, but as I just indicated, something that is definitely here to stay in California. So if it does please the council, I'll begin by reintroducing myself. I am Josiah Young. I am an attorney, but I function as a legislative advocate, lobbyist for Churchill White. Have been paying close attention to these issues, and what I will be doing is giving you all kind of a brief history, and for some it may be a repetitive history, but there are portions of this presentation where we'll be updating you on the status of new laws as they pertain to California. Feedback from the audience, and as we work towards a council decision or discussion, he will help facilitate that. So to begin, just a quick format, we'll talk about the history of marijuana regulation. We'll discuss pending issues related to regulation. Then we will have the public participation component of today's presentation, where there are some topic boards set up in the back, and you can ignore them for now, but they will be relevant a little bit later. Next is a sample regulation, so not a staff recommendation, but something that can be used as an example of the type of ordinances and codes that may be adopted pursuant to the new statewide marijuana laws. And then there will be opportunity for additional public comment, and of course giving the City Council the ability to make any decisions here today or discuss the issues. So we will move on and discuss the history of marijuana regulation by beginning with the federal level, beginning on the federal level. So right now, marijuana is an illegal Schedule I narcotic. A Schedule I drug is a drug that has no medical, no permissive use under any kind of federal statute or law, and as such, the dual system in California of a medical marijuana system and a recreational marijuana system will not be recognized under federal law. In addition to criminal penalties for the possession, cultivation, use, procurement of marijuana, the banking industry is subject to overlapping federal and state regulations, which create significant challenges for the banking of marijuana revenues. Illegal business expenses cannot be deducted from federal income tax liability. So when you're talking about private business owners who are conducting marijuana business, there's a significant challenge as to whether they're able to transact business and pay federal taxes the same as everyone else would. And then also, of course, we have the federal administration. So under President Obama, former President Obama, the administration said that it would not challenge the laws legalizing marijuana, nor prosecute individuals legitimately participating in the state system. However, we know that Obama is not the president, and that is subject to change. Is everyone okay so far?
Hey, Josiah, I'm going to
Yes.
So just because we're following some of this stuff is very of the moment through confirmation hearings. Jeff Sessions, who is put up to be the next Attorney General, has stated his opposition to both medical and recreational marijuana. Also, President Trump has said that while he has no interest in pursuing folks who are using marijuana medicinally, that his administration would not support recreational use of marijuana. Sessions, in his most recent, when he was asked this question point blank, indicated that essentially the Obama policy, which is that we don't have the federal government doesn't have the resources to pursue folks who are conforming with state law and doing it for medical reasons, but he would not say that unlike previous administrations, he would not go so far to say that we're not saying that they would not prosecute. So, so the way it's going on the federal level, it looks like recreational, irrespective of what California does, will probably remain illegal, and medical will probably be selectively enforced if enforced at all at the federal level, based off of the information we have now.
And I guess to reiterate Mr. White's statements, I mean, there have been a lot of statements by President Trump and Attorney General candidate Sessions, and so it's not clear at this moment what will happen on the federal level. So now we'll get into the history of marijuana regulation at the state level. So the first bill that kind of really revolutionized the way California looks at medical marijuana was the Compassionate Use Act, Proposition 215, and that was about 20 years ago. So there was a 20-year history of medical marijuana regulation or some type of consideration of medical marijuana in California. And what the original Prop 215 did was allow doctors to write recommendations, so not prescriptions, but recommendations for medical marijuana. And also, for the rest of the night, we may use marijuana and cannabis interchangeably, but we're referring to the same thing. But doctors were able to provide recommendations, and those recommendations immunized patients and primary caregivers for possession and cultivation. So if you had a doctor's note, you could get a free pass, if you will. Then SB 420 came about several years ago, and what it did was create a voluntary identification program and expanded immunities for patients and caregivers. Really what you would see there was the birth of the collective and cooperative model, where you saw a lot of nonprofits operating and functioning as marijuana businesses, essentially. However, under the guise of medical marijuana structure, and under 420, they had to be formed as a nonprofit in a sense to afford the protection, to be afforded the protection of the law. So in 2015, a series of 3 bills kind of made major changes to the medical marijuana regime here in California. And the 3 bills, AB 266, 243, and SB 643, essentially created a dual-track licensing system between the state and the local governments to permit cannabis business, more commercial medical marijuana activity. So I think that the key highlights from this slide would be that there are several departments tasked with the regulating and oversight of the industry. So we have the Department of Consumer Affairs, we have the Department of Food and Agriculture, and so through these various divisions and departments, there is a oversight body that has been created. More specifically, the Bureau of Medical Cannabis was created to specifically administer medical marijuana. So to go a little bit more in depth on the MRSA, I'm sorry, let me take a step back. MCRSA stands for the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. It was initially called the Medical Marijuana Cannabis and Safety, I'm sorry, Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, but it is now changed to cannabis. So in depth, MRSA, personal cultivation. What the 2015 laws did was it kind of set some limits on personal cultivation. Prior to MRSA, patients were allowed to grow as many plants as recommended by their doctors. And that obviously creates some significant problems when you have people growing 99 plus plants for personal use. So what this did was limit the square footage of cultivation for personal use. And it also creates a licensing structure for commercial medical marijuana businesses. There are 6 categories that were created with this legislation, and those categories are cultivation, manufacture, transportation, distribution, dispensary, and testing. And so what this means is that the state will now license these categories of medical marijuana businesses, and the local municipalities have the responsibility to either license those same type of businesses or ban them. So under local control, municipalities may ban personal cultivation and commercial business. They may tax commercial activity, local tax, and regulate through land use permitting and zoning.
And just a couple things I want to just add. One of the reasons, when you hear people saying having 99 plant recommendations, one of the reasons that has come up is because different patients would basically use cannabis or marijuana allegedly in different ways. So some people, you can't just think about people smoking it, which is probably the most commonly identified form of using marijuana. People will sometimes make oils or something, and that will take a lot more raw plant material in order to be able to create a certain amount of medicine. So, but it also, the 99 plant rule also created a lot of potential abuse in terms of people maybe growing more than they would need. And it's important to understand that the 99 plant, many of these recommendation levels are based off of federal sentencing guidelines. So anything above 99 plants has a sentence enhancement, and so it's a longer federal prison terms. And so there's a reason that people say stay not below 99 plants or things like this. I mean, they're all tied to federal sentencing guidelines.
Okay. So the big news from last year was the passage of the ballot initiative, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, hereby referred to as AMA, and what that did was create a structure for recreational marijuana. So it had been on the ballot several times before in California. Last year was the year that it was able to pass, I believe, with this above 60% support for the initiative. And so what it does is essentially legalize possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana under state law by adults 21 and older. Also with the possession, they can transport, possess, they can even donate, give away that ounce of marijuana to someone else. It also legalizes cultivation of up to 6 plants for personal use. I want to point out right now that that's a bit in conflict with the medical marijuana regime in MRSA, because under MRSA there's a spatial limitation, right, 100 square feet. There is no indication of plant limits, and municipalities also have the right to ban personal cultivation for medical marijuana. However, municipalities may not ban personal use cultivation of recreational marijuana of up to 6 plants. And we'll get into that a little bit more in depth. What it does is it designates state agencies to license and regulate the marijuana industry, and those licenses are supposed to start rolling out in January of 2018. It permits adults 21 and over to purchase marijuana, so not under a nonprofit model, but just outright retail commercial sales at state licensed businesses. And it imposes a state excise tax of 15% on retail sales of marijuana, and a cultivation tax of $9.25 per ounce of flower and $2.75 per ounce of leaves. So to go a little bit more in depth into MRSA, MRSA creates 19 license types for commercial marijuana businesses. That's in parallel to what we just saw with MRSA. It allows for vertical integration. I thought that was important to mention here, because what that means is that businesses are allowed to hold license types from all of those different categories under recreational marijuana and the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. So basically you can be a cultivator, you can be a distributor, you can be a manufacturer, and under the medical system you cannot do all of those things. So it kind of opens up the business a bit. You will probably see larger scale businesses who are able to vertically integrate through each of these license types. And on the local control front, local governments may completely prohibit any business license under the Act. So that means any commercial activity may be stopped by the county, or pardon me, by the municipality. Cities and counties may tax each of these business functions as well. Quick reconciliation of the medical use statutes and the recreational use statutes. The recreational use AMA was patterned largely on MRSA. The Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation has been renamed the Bureau of Marijuana Control. That's again headed by Lori Ajax, who was a former supervisor at the Alcohol Board, and the entire industry is now going to be regulated under this bureau. Both systems still, however, exist, and licenses for medical and adult use are distinct. It's important to note that the legislature and agency may move to consolidate these systems, which would help make it a little bit neater, but for now, we have to deal with both issues. Here's a quick taxation summary of medical marijuana, or pardon me, of marijuana. I'll start on the right side in this blue box as it applies to medical and non-medical. So all retail sales of marijuana are subject to a state excise tax of 15%. State cultivation taxes are applicable to all cultivation of marijuana. There can be local excise tax on any commercial marijuana business activity. That would be a decision made at this level here with the council. And although it's not a tax as a revenue source, there are local regulatory fees that a municipality is able to collect in order to cover administrative costs. Now if we look at this box here on the left, as it applies to only non-medical, there is also, on top of these taxes, a sales and use tax of 7.25% of the retail price. And basically what this means is that medical marijuana is exempted from sales and use tax. The idea behind that being, to help the potentially financially indigent clients or people who need access to medical marijuana but may not have the kind of financial means to purchase it. They're not looking for recreational use, they have a medical need. So to get a little bit, I'm sorry.
Can you go back real quick?
Sure.
So one of the things, of all the jurisdictions that we represent, only one that has imposed a tax, and they just did it in the last November election, and that was in the city of Dixon. The tax that they put on the book is very similar to ones that other jurisdictions who allow medical marijuana to exist. So it lets you go up to 15%. You can be less, but you have to go basically to the ballot box and get authorization from the voters to put in place that tax, and so that allows them to go up to 15%. Dixon currently does not allow any kind of cannabis industry, so they just have the 6 12 plant limitation, 6 mature, 6 immature limitation. So the tax isn't being used, but it was put in place by a proactive measure. Most jurisdictions that we represent are looking forward in the future, probably putting a tax in place, irrespective of whether or not they plan on allowing cannabis to be transacted in their community, just kind of as a measure in the future. These are handy to do when there's another election because it can really reduce the cost of putting it on the books as opposed to having to call a special election and then sort of the cost that goes along with that. So just kind of want to give you that background.
Thank you. So now we'll get into quickly defining these terms. I mean, we're still talking about the history of the regulation and kind of the landscape that we're in as we drive and drill down into what will happen here. But cultivation, that's the growing of the marijuana, but it's all the activity involving planting, growing, harvesting, drying, curing, grading, or trimming. Personal use, and these are definitions that are summarized essentially from both the medical marijuana statutes as well as the recreational statutes. Personal use is for patient use, so who's been recommended by a doctor or a primary caregiver with a maximum of 5 patients under their care, or less than 6 plants for recreational use. Again, that's a clearly defined limitation on personal cultivation under the recreational statute. And commercial cultivation would be cultivation for the sale of cannabis, not for personal use. A dispensary is a facility where cannabis products are sold. That's where it's going to go from the business to the end user. So whoever would be consuming the product, whatever it would be. It's important to notice deliveries are the commercial transfer of cannabis from a dispensary to a patient or caregiver. Deliveries are not allowed to function without a brick and mortar dispensary associated with it. Manufacturer is the preparation of edibles, byproducts, or concentrates, the oils, as Mr. White was just indicating. The big issue as far as manufacturer will be the definition of volatile and non-volatile substances. And that's being still defined through regulations, but some of these marijuana products can be pretty dangerous to make through whatever processes, and so that definitely deserves a keen look. Transportation is the transfer of cannabis products from one licensee to another. I want to point out here that nowhere in the state can the transportation of marijuana be limited in a municipality. So you cannot stop the transportation or the use of city roads or county roads for the transport of marijuana. Distribution, it's an interesting...
But just to be clear on transportation, that's through with no stops.
No stops.
They have commercial transactions to take place. It's just literally
That's right.
driving.
And then also to clarify, though, it is a licensed category, however. I mean, these people will be licensed as transporters and be engaging in the business of transporting both recreational and medical marijuana. Distribution is the procurement, sale, and transport of cannabis. It's taking it from cultivators. And under MRSA and under the medical statutes, cultivators are required to send their marijuana to distributors. Under ALMA, they're not required to send through distributors. So, that's an interesting piece of, an interesting issue there, but as it applies to us, I think that it's going to take an evaluation of whether you want that type of business here in the city. Testing, all marijuana products must be tested. Testing will analyze the product for cannabinoids and terpenes, which are kind of components of the marijuana plant itself, solvents and chemicals, additives, foreign materials such as hair and insect matter, and microbiological impurities. The whole thrust of that being to make sure that the cannabis is clean and safe for consumption. There are also some specific regulations around, not marketing to children, keeping the product tamper safe, and et cetera, and et cetera. And all of that is being defined through regulation. So this is a quick overview of how those license categories interact, and I just kind of tried to explain it, so we'll run through this pretty quickly. A cultivator will grow it. A licensed transporter will then transport it to a manufacturing place where it will either become, an edible or it will be packaged. It will again require a licensed transporter to take it into a distribution center. I want to point out here that under ALMA, where distribution is no longer required, third-party testing still must happen to all cannabis products before being transported again to the dispensary or delivery service where the end user will get the product. So now, history of marijuana regulation locally. Here in Sonora, Title 8 of the Health and Safety Code, Chapter 8:35, discusses medical marijuana dispensaries. It begins with some definitions, and then it goes into an explicit ban on medical marijuana dispensaries. Cultivation is also banned by exclusion from the permissive use zoning regulations in Title 17. Would point out here that if we want to continue that ban on cultivation, it would be best done through an express ordinance banning cultivation. And Ordinance 827 passed in, I believe, May of 2015, which created a ban on smoking in public places. That is also duplicative language that has appeared in the ALMA statutes, the recreational use. Public ingestion of marijuana is not allowed. However, there's an ordinance on the books that also codifies that locally. And then we also want to point out proposed Ordinance 834, which was before the council, I believe it was February of last year. There were some discussions about permitting or banning certain aspects of the cannabis business, and I don't believe that that has been taken up since, and this may be a great opportunity to kind of, bring everything back to the table.
And just to be clear, a lot of the categories that Josiah has talked about are new categories. Manufacturing, transport, they all loosely existed, but those really created those new categories. Before, you were only really looking at dispensaries, so that was the retail side of it, or you were looking at cultivation, and that was the producing. And so now they've gotten a lot more specific because of the other elements of it. So we feel that your ordinance kind of dealt with the major topics, but because of changes in law, there's a lot more now that needs to be looked at and examined, and you're not just looking at 2 components, you're looking at 18. So,
Exactly.
So.
Okay. So now bear with me. It's Tuolumne. Tuolumne. Pardon me. He prepped me like 3 or 4 times. That shows you what I'm good and not good at. But
Originally from New York, so
you can't hold it against me. In the county, unincorporated portions of the county, there are 2 laws really that regulate the the marijuana industry at current. Right now, in February of 2016, the county restricted personal cultivation, so individual patients, which indicates medical use, may grow up to 12 plants or as much as 24 plants for patients in the same residence. It can be outside in a fenced area or in an area of 50 square feet inside of the home. With regard to marijuana businesses, the Board of Soups unanimously banned all commercial activity related to marijuana, including cultivation and retail sales. However, they are convening a work group to consider regulating commercial activity. I know for a while a lot of municipalities and locales were participating in what was known as Bannapalooza, where they were just going ahead and banning to try to get ahead of a March 1st deadline to retain local control. That deadline has since been eradicated, I know, as the council understands, but just to clarify, when banning things, I think a lot of people are banning, or the county may be banning at this point to get ahead of the January 1, 2018 implementation of state regulation and state licensing, and we'll revisit it when the time is appropriate. Okay, so quickly, other relevant jurisdictions. So Sacramento County is permitting commercial cultivation and dispensaries. They have not opened up applications for dispensaries yet. They are beginning the process of opening applications for commercial cultivation. They definitely have been a leader in the region on this issue, and they're very permissive as it comes to this. Yolo County also permits commercial cultivation, but bans dispensaries, which is interesting, but we're seeing a lot of activity. Oh, pardon me. We're seeing a lot of activity in terms of people seeking permits in Yolo County, and land that is being zoned and permitted for marijuana cultivation is getting a lot of real estate action. So that's something also to take a look at. In Merced, permits personal cultivation of 6 plants and permits 4 dispensaries. And Stanislaus County bans all commercial marijuana activity. They too are convening a work group to revisit this issue.
So, and just to step on this, almost all of our cities, because of the deadline that was proposed through some legislation, before that deadline had elapsed and before it had been pulled back, went through and did basically just complete and bans in order to maintain local control,
Right.
with the idea in every situation that they were going to kind of go back and revisit it and figure out what made sense. Most of our jurisdictions, we're waiting until November passed to see what happened with the initiative, because obviously the state voting to allow recreational marijuana changed the way that many jurisdictions were going to plan on approaching it. And like I said, which I'll probably keep harping on a little bit tonight, I don't think a lot of us were envisioning the Trump administration such that, and how that would possibly change the rules. And so the one caveat to all this is there is a significant federal component, and we need probably some time to figure out how that develops, to figure out the complete impact on, as it relates to this.
Absolutely. So pending issues related to marijuana regulation. So this is kind of when we're cutting into the what's next in the decision-making process, and Mr. White is spot on right there, talking about on the federal level, we have to continue to look at the potential confirmation of Jeff Sessions, some of the comments that were made. I mean, he just kind of made the comments, so I won't reiterate there, but it definitely can create some significant impacts. And actually, the one thing I'll add is there are actually provisions written into both AMA and MRSA that envision a future federal administration where marijuana has been descheduled and it will be federally legal. However, that's the state also doing a fortune teller job and not knowing really what's to come. As far as the state, what's next? So the 2018 licensing and regulation implementation, I mean, there's going to be a lot of action on that front. And there will have to be clarifying changes to the laws. There are some inconsistencies, there are some minor glitches that are going to be addressed in court, and probably have some legislative cleanup bills that we would be able to update you on, but will certainly take a lot of action on the state to ramp up this licensing system. And of course, locally, we would want to update our code to be relevant, and we would want to get ahead of the issue of licenses at the state level.
And we'll allude to some of the other impacts that come in from complete bans. So
that's right. Yep.
he's going to talk about that a little bit, but there are some potential impacts financial to the city if we were just to complete bans. So.
This is really good. We have not even practiced this, he and I together, and he's hitting every single point that's next. We'll take a look at this local control chart.
It's like I almost had it in front of me.
And just to quickly summarize what we've kind of talked about long-windedly here just a moment ago, on personal cultivation, the local municipality may ban or regulate medical cultivation, but may not ban indoor cultivation of recreational marijuana of up to 6 plants. The state, however, the local municipality may regulate that activity, and by regulate, I think that means, but that means that they may permit, permits or require registration of your indoor grows, and that is, of course, to alleviate concerns of fire and police personnel, and just being able to identify where in the city marijuana is being grown. As far as commercial business, the local municipality has the right to ban, regulate, and tax, or the combination of all three, both medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. And then right here, if a city bans commercial cultivation, personal outdoor cultivation, or retail sales of marijuana or products, it is ineligible to receive certain state grant monies funded through the new state excise tax that takes effect on January 1. So that means if you decide not to participate, if you decide to decline, there may be buckets of money that the local municipality is now excluded from by banning.
Not pots of money.
Okay.
The green stuff,
That's
huh?
cool as
So again, we wanted to highlight that. So, I'm going to run through these relatively quickly, but, definitely want to hit the high points. What are the benefits of cultivation? Of course, for the medical patients, there's ease of access, tax revenues, and we don't want to harp on that, but that is something that is available to the locale. Reduced prosecution for minor marijuana crimes, so less of a jam up, I guess, in the criminal system. And city has the permitting authority, so you would be able to limit the number of grows, the locations, the restrictions. You would be able to have inspections, and so those are the benefits of allowing cultivation.
Let me go over a couple other things.
Sure.
So one of the benefits is knowing where operations are going on, and particularly for fire personnel, being able to go in, have a list of chemicals that are on site. In some jurisdictions, some of the fire departments and the chief will be able to talk about this best. They won't, as soon as if they go in and they find out that it's a grow house or that there's marijuana being grown, they take a defensive standpoint, and they won't allow anybody to get hurt because they don't know what chemicals they're walking into or situations that they're walking into. So each jurisdiction, each chief has different policies, but there is some value in knowing. And this one happened today in one of my other jurisdictions.
Oh, wow.
I'll talk about.
Okay, so in terms of the problems with cultivation, you're going to have an increase in marijuana in the city. Now that's, a bit of a given, given the fact that recreational use has been approved statewide. However, if you're allowing big, huge grows or grows in the city, you're going to have odors for certain. You'll have water issues, things leaking into the water, such as fertilizers. There will be no clear testing or potency of the cultivation sites, so they will have to be tested before going to the end user, but we don't know the quality of the cannabis being grown. There is a likelihood for increased crime, traffic accidents, fire and emergency risks. Those are some of the things that Mr. White was speaking to. And of course, administrative and staff time to administer the system. While fees will be able to be collected, that's certainly a significant burden.
So we had lots of issues in other jurisdictions with outdoor grows, particularly as it relates to both odor and then thefts related to during the harvest season, people jumping fences trying to get to the product because of the value of it. So we've had some issues with outdoor cultivation. And then when I was alluding to with the call that I had today related to Patterson, one of the things I want to let everybody know, and I think this is part of the education system, is just because the initiative passed, it doesn't trump with all of the city rules, ordinances, and regulations. You can't just go and open up a medical marijuana dispensary. The initiative process didn't change that. There's cities still maintain local control, and it's important that folks know that, because as things change, we don't want people to enter into leases and do things and then realize that they can't transact business. And these dispensaries, particularly the retail-facing ones, they are required to have business licenses and do all the other things that are required of other similarly operating businesses. So, just wanted to bring that.
And private businesses will not get the protection of state law, will not be issued a state license without a license from the local municipality first. So I know there was a period of time when it was, unclear whether state license would be allowed and be sufficient in the absence of local regulation. But that has been clarified. Without local approval for a marijuana business, you will not be approved on the state level. So there's significant local control there, particularly as it relates to commercial cannabis activity. In terms of potential dispensary benefits, the ease of access issue is again there. You're going to have the marijuana will be being used in the city. The question is, will people have to go outside of the city to get it, to procure it? Tax revenue directly to the city, and again, the ability of the city to manage these issues, manage the land, have do inspections, know what they're walking into when a fire chief walks into a building, as opposed to just leaving it to the black market or leaving it to without regulation, where you have less of a view into what's going on with these activities.
So one thing we should make really clear is there is no way to eliminate in California marijuana, particularly medical marijuana. People are going to have access to it. So the question is how they get access to it in proximity and things of that nature. But it's not a question, law enforcement would not be able to just go up to somebody because they have, an ounce of marijuana and just say, you're going to jail and be dispositive. Now, most of the safeguards in the law are basically defenses to prosecution. Mm-hmm. So you can still be arrested and charged with a crime, it's just a defense. But we're not seeing police be particularly active in this area, and it's in terms of, locals can't just say that there's not going to be marijuana in California or in Sonora. That part's off the table.
That's right. the regulating authority really lies in the regulating of the business element, but in terms of possession or use or kind of it being around, that's pretty much been decided by the voters at this point. So in terms of dispensary problems, again, you're going to increase the marijuana, the risk of crime and danger to the owners of those businesses. I mean, again, we're talking about a cash business, so we're talking about something where they may or may not be banking their revenues. So there may be a lot more cash contained in the safes of these businesses, which of course has self-explanatory problems. And before I move on to the next issue, like fire and police, I want to just say we didn't put up slides for manufacturer, testing, all these other license types, but these same benefits and these same potential problems exist across those business types. So as far as the fire department concerns, these were the things that Mr. White was talking about. The legality of operation is a question, right? They come into a grow. A lot of times fire personnel don't know whether a grow is operating under the protection of the law or not. They often default to calling law enforcement, but that creates kind of, administrative hiccups. And so, also fire department concerns would be in terms of traps or electrical hazards or unsafe modifications to create these growing structures. And so if you don't regulate, then you're still going to be subject to these issues. If you regulate, then the city has a greater chance of being able to understand at least the level of these type of cannabis activities going on, and then they would be able to say, hey, you can't set up a booby trap, to come into a grow house.
So these are issues that we've dealt with quite a bit. Over the last 2 years, we've had issues with people stealing electricity and kind of walking into those situations. We haven't personally had as much experience with people booby trapping issues, but it was electrical hazards, and then people making a lot of issues with unsafe building modifications, people who basically are converting all or part of a home to an indoor grow, and then obviously not getting the electrical modifications approved by the city or inspected, and usually we're called out because of a fire. And so the city attorney's office gets involved because of the nature of the situation, because a lot of times we'll have to go in and just bulldoze the homes, again, because know what kind of chemicals have been used, or there's other concerns. Anyways, those are issues that have arisen.
Right. As far as the police department concerns, just hit it very quickly. Dispensaries are self-explanatory robbery targets. Deliveries are also subject to a lot of kind of dangerous activity. When you have an individual in a car with cash, with marijuana products, their issues can significantly be, or the issues can be quite significant. And then also enforcing these regulations could take limited resources away from other priority police projects. I'm sorry that's not on the end of the slide here, but again, just things to consider.
And this also goes to how careful you have to be when you're essentially legislating on these issues. So, for instance, at one point in time, cities like Sacramento thought about requiring, armed security guard. Well, one of the problems with having armed security guards is it's a sentencing enhancement to have firearms, basically where they deem a drug transaction to be taking place. So you deal with the secondary sentencing enhancement when you require that. So that's why most jurisdictions don't have that requirement in it. But it kind of goes to the level of detail and thought that you have to go
That's right.
into these things.
And that's essentially what we're previewing here, because again, to dig into this stuff, it will take a restructuring of ordinances, it will take decisions by the council, but these are the issues as we've heard them in other jurisdictions, and almost as the writing is on the wall, as more and more of these businesses will start to crop up. That was another bad joke. I got one in there. Okay, planning department concerns, same thing. Zoning restrictions and permitting systems, the issues, you really want to know where these things are happening. Right now, there is no window into, or no legal structure to know where all the grows are happening, because most of the grows are happening outside of the law or within the gray area. But, given these regulatory structures, you can zone, you can permit, you can inspect, you can really regulate the commercial industry. So now I'm going to invite my colleague Chris up here. I appreciate the time on the dais with you all, or on the microphone, and I'm here to answer any questions if you have them with me as well. Thank you.
And while Chris is going up, I just want to say that we're agnostic as to result. We don't care. We're just here to share with you the experiences that we've had in other jurisdictions who face similar types of problems. But tonight is about doing what's best for Sonora. And Sonora is unique, and it's one of the reasons that attracted me wanting to work here. So it's about finding out what those priorities, are. And this is one way of kind of gauging from a very, very small subset of the community, their feelings, and then but you as the elected officials having a good pulse on, what's acceptable, what works, what doesn't work, and what you need more information on. So tonight's as much about getting you the initial grouping of information and finding out what other questions that you may have that we need to get you answers to.
Like I said, my name is Chris LaGrassa. I'm an attorney at Churchwell White with Doug and Josiah here. Originally, we were going to go through each question on the boards back there, but I think we all kind of have an idea of what each question will entail. I'm going to be back there with stickers. If you're a resident, I'll give you one color. If you're a non-resident, I'll give you a different color. Feel free to vote on every board.
Only once, though, please.
Only once, yeah. There's one board that
Per board.
you might do several votes on. If you need extra stickers, just come talk to me. The three of us will be back there answering any questions any of you guys have. So yeah, it's just to give the council kind of an idea where the community is at on a lot of these issues. So yeah, after everyone's voted, I'll tally them up, kind of give everyone the results, and we'll throw it to public comment and some comments from the council. So.
So with that, Mayor, we probably ask for about 5 to 10 minute recess to just let people vote.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question or ask to do something? I assume that the TV camera will be turned off during that portion, but the people that are watching this should at least know what the questions are.
Oh, okay. Well, when they come back with the tally, the results, then
Yeah.
we will read what the
Okay.
question
Yeah, I'll read
is.
the question when I read the
Cool.
results.
I just want to make sure that
Okay.
the TV people got that.
So we're going to take about a 10-minute recess while the people who are here in the audience can go back and look at the questions and vote on their pleasure, and then we'll be back with the outcome of that information.